Welcome to Gold Derby Meet the Experts documentary film panel. Today I'm joined by Laura McGann, director of The Deepest Breath, Dee Smith, director of Kokomo City, Lisa Cortes, director of Little Richard, I Am Everything, and Amanda McBaine, director of The Mission. The accolades are piling on for these films. You all are incredible filmmakers. I want to ask sort of an icebreaker question. If you were teaching a film study course, what is one film that you would show your students and why? And I'm going to start with Laura.
Oh, thanks. Well, one film that I would show my students, one documentary or
It doesn't have to be.
okay.
Whatever inspires you.
Okay, well there's an amazing film called the Void. Touching the Void that is it's a few years old now, but it's one of the first kind of films where they merge, documentary and recon and archive in a really, really immersive way. And you're kind of in the moment, but you're also going through this story with the people telling you at a time where obviously it's already happened, but they're also going back there and doing the recon themselves. And that's what you see in the film. And it's an incredibly dramatic story with an arc that resembles a narrative. So that I think like it would be really, sometimes with documentaries we kind of like, I think as a student I certainly it took me a while to come around to the idea that of what a documentary could look like in terms of a narrative arc, in terms of it having a beginning, middle, and end, and being a story. I love stories and I love real life, and the best stories are from real life. And quite often as a filmmaker starting out, it's hard to kind of marry those two things. And it's a really kind of, yeah, it's a real learning curve as well in terms of like um story structure and the basics and the elements of storytelling and applying them to documentary. I think I think it would be a good place to start.
Dee, how about you?
Damn it. I honestly, I'm gonna be honest, this is such a tough question for me. um, I watch different films for different reasons. I don't watch too much, but I don't know, for some reason I'm drawn to more of like moments in my childhood, like Color Purple. I know it's very timely for me to say that. Um, but well, you know what? I probably would take that back. I will go with Crying Game.
Oh,
Um,
that's a choice.
yeah, it's not a documentary, but it was just one of those movies that lingers, and you don't know how to feel after. I like stuff like that. I mean, I love Devil Wear Prada, but I like movies that really haunts me, you know. And it makes me want to just go back. It's like being attracted to something or someone that's toxic. It's like you're trying to figure this thing out. You're trying to make it right, but it's not meant to be right. It's like in Crying Game, there were so many really emotionally provoking moments, and might I add, it was so ahead of its time. I remember a moment where when he, you know, got sick after she exposed that she was transgender and she was naked, and just that, even though I didn't identify as transgender then, I definitely knew I was. I just didn't know that. And that made me feel icky. It made me feel away. But now that I'm able to step back, the director was really trying to do what I did with Kokomo City, push the envelope, be real, but also at the same time, I don't know how real that reaction is in private. I don't know. I don't know. And so see, even right now, I'm getting triggered. That's a movie I wouldn't mind remaking, to be honest with you. But there's so many things that just kind of like jolt you. Yeah.
Lisa, how about you?
It's a hard one. No one has, I think all of us have done a lot of roundtables and interviews, and no one's asked us that. So I'm going for today, because if you ask me tomorrow, I'm going to have a different answer. It would be Raoul Peck's "I Am Not Your Negro." I am such a James Baldwin fan, and what Raoul is incredibly successful in doing with that film is this tapestry of Baldwin's voice and history through time. The narration by Samuel Jackson I thought, is really great connective tissue. And this unpacking of seemingly heady, complicated ideas that he's able to unspool in a way that you understand why Baldwin went on the specific journey that he did, and his framing on what are the true issues that we need to be looking at if we are going to have any type of parity in our society for all members. And it's black and white, like Dee's film, which I just like that you took that chance, Dee. And it's so fitting for the Baldwin who I personally knew, in reflecting his voice and what was a constant in the struggles that he was highlighting and working for constructive change.
And Amanda.
I almost want to refuse to answer this question because there's so many, in a way, what I would want, I never went to film school, but what I would want from a documentary class is a presentation of the full breadth of what a documentary can be. And I think we have that a little bit here too. You have I have a very essayistic film, you have immersive verite, you have these incredible archival deep dive films. So I'm gonna cheat and just say that I would do probably a class that involves an amazing, there's a whole wealth of verite film, but the one that really got me into film was Brothers Keeper, which is a Joe Berlinger and Sanofsky film from a long time ago. Oh my gosh, was that his name? Anyway, it's true verite about these four brothers and just such an extraordinary character study. And then I would also show Act of Killing as another example of something that has a little more meta in it. And then Leviathan, right? A completely immersive, just like almost anthropological thing. And then One Day in September, speaking of touching the void, just an extraordinary way to tell a past tense story using it as immersively as you possibly can. And I think immersion is really the key. Character and immersion, like those are the things that really motivate me in this business. So that's my non-answer answer.
Well, you mentioned you made 4 different style of films. They are very different films, but at the core of each of them is someone who did something very brave, someone who went against the grain, someone who went out against what a large part of society thought they should do. How much does something like that impact your decision in who or what you want to make a film about? And what is one lesson you learned from the subjects that you were making a documentary about? I'll start with Lisa.
Well, when I watch the incredible films that my colleagues here have made, I kept thinking about what was that connective tissue. And for me, all of our films are about these outliers, or that are making, and they're shifting the atmosphere, as I like to say. Now, they might not always be seen and known, but through their own sense of conviction and sense of self, they're able to make that impression and be that moment that then puts into action a bigger ramification for others in their personal, in their family space, in their, their religious community, and ask us to, as an audience, to think about some of the effects of individuals who we might not see and recognize in our everyday lives, but are actively taking these chances and being bold in their own way. And at the same time, addressing this idea of erasure, who tells the story, who is centered. And so that I saw kind of as a through line for all of our films.
Lisa, what about you? What's your biggest decision-making process in defining who you want to make a subject?
Do I want to live with them for in my mind and everywhere I turn for 2 to 4 years? There has to be something very compelling about either the subject, like democracy, and with the film I did called All In: The Fight for Democracy, because I felt that film that I did with Liz Garbus, it needed to come out before the elections in 2020 to wake people up about this continuing plan book that has worked to restrict access to the vote. So, there's always a personal stake. And I never do the same kind of film, but I'm always looking for worlds that I haven't seen depicted with the perspective and emotionality that I'm going to bring. And that I think something Dee said earlier that I really tapped into is like, how can I be disruptive in the storytelling? There are music bio doc there's a template. And I was very intentional about saying, okay, Little Richard, you on your own are really exciting, but let's play with magic realism. Let's introduce things that, particularly as a person of color, I've been told, well, no, you don't make those kind of films. Well, actually, I do make those. I make films. And so it is important through the act of making to be engaged in a way that it excites me, but it also is going to push me to be experimental with sometimes the constraints that exist through the mere act of making something.
Amanda, what about you? What influences what you want to make a film about?
Probably people and stories that I know I'm going to be challenged by, probably in an effort to grow and make sense of the world that we live in. And that pretty much always means going into spaces that I don't know much about or don't have a lot of experience with. The evangelical community in this case would be that, or how do I find myself in, I mean, when I hear the story of John Chow going to North Sentinel Island, trying to convert them, I didn't necessarily think I was part of that story initially, but then of course you spend a couple years investigating and find out that what we're telling a story of is a little bit a story about stories, and all the stories you take in as you grow up and how they inform how you understand the world. Mine weren't Bible stories, but they were National Geographic stories. And how did that inform how I understand Indigenous people? It did. And then reckoning with that. And that's part of what I learned in the process of making this film. And that's what you really hope for, honestly, is that you will be surprised in the 2 or more years you spend, and that you will meet people like I met Dan Everett, who kind of change you and surprise you. And that's what's great, is there are still people out there who surprise me and change me. And I hope that keeps happening as I get older and older, and hopefully get to keep making movies.
Laura, what about you? What inspired you to make a film? And could you make a film about a subject that you don't necessarily like or don't respect? I mean, we see documentaries on serial killers, Hitler. I mean, you don't have to make a documentary about something that you don't feel passionate about. How do you feel about that? Do you need to feel passion for what you're making a documentary about, or is it all about finding the story?
Well, I don't need, like, I'm not a free diver, you know, I'm not a passionate free diver, you know, so I didn't have a passion to do free diving, but I had would I make a film about it? There has to be something. It's all about connection. I have to connect with it in some way. It has to kind of like speak to me and like just have something go off my brain to go, wait a minute, I need to know more about this. I need to figure that I don't understand this, or I I need to know how this happens. It needs to be like, I need to have 500 questions, you know, for everybody, and it needs to be a puzzle that I need to figure out. I wouldn't want to live with serial killers for 2 years in my house. Not my cup of tea. So there's some things that I say, oh, I'm not interested in that, but there's other things that would be really open to just learning more about. And I suppose another part is that, like, the stakes in life are high, right? Like, you know, no matter what, you in your family, in your day-to-day life, the stakes are high, and you don't have to be jumping off a cliff or diving into the sea for the stakes to be high. It could be within a relationship, it could be with an addiction, it could be anything. And I think, like, when human beings are in situations where it's you have to figure out, it's like fight or flight. It's like, what do they do when this happens? And you'll never be able to answer what you'll do until you're in the moment, and you'll do, and then you'll find out what you do. And when people are tested like that, we learn incredible things about ourselves, and as a story that can be enlightening. And I suppose, going back to something you said a few minutes ago about, like, outliers and people who are kind of going against the grain, I suppose you'd look at, in our case, Stephen and Alessia, they were both outliers, but there was something about Alessia's story of being a 13-year-old girl going to these free diving lessons full of older men in their 30s, and being fantastic, and then being told, actually, you're not allowed to compete because you're too young, and been sent away. And she sat in her room and waited with the attention of somebody who was very alert, waited for 4 years to get back and do it again. And I just thought, that is something that is something in her that I think is incredible. And where the hell is that going to take her? And it's taken her, like, you know, she's now deepest woman in the world, 123 meters, you know. So it's pieces like that I connect with, and I'm like, I want to know more about you. I think you're, you know, really, there's something special here.
And Dee, your film was obviously very personal for you. You know, what types of film would you be interested in making in the future? And what did you learn from this being your feature directorial debut? What a debut that was. What would you have told yourself at the beginning, like, that you now know?
Wow. Oh my God. This man's good. Y'all hear me? The questions sound simple, but they're really not simple. Like, you know what? Because there are so many things that I've learned in this process, I'm just gonna go with the greatest thing. I had no idea that I needed healing. I just thought I just needed an opportunity to get back on my feet. I didn't know that this process of shooting trans women that has never had a voice, never had the opportunity or the respect to just speak their side of the story. I never thought such a project would trigger me into healing. And I know this is really far off making a film, or what I'm supposed to say as a filmmaker. I don't know. But I've lived my life so many years chasing and asking for validation and begging and proving and fucking barely making it, and just so many years. And the very thing that made, I mean, being kicked out of the music industry, the very thing that made me a victim made me a victor. I did everything I could to avoid it. And I ended up telling the stories of my sisters. I've never done sex work, but there was something when they were telling their stories that just made me one with them. I'm not greater, I'm not less. It's just, I'm there. Thank you so much for allowing me to film you, and keep your footage, keep your words, and do what I want to do with them in editing. And you're gonna just sit back and just rely on me, someone you don't even know, for over a year of not hearing back, seeing any footage. That is the animal that you need in filmmaking. And it's not ferocious animals that you need. You need like wildebeest that knows that they have to cross this river every year to risk their life just to move their bloodline forward. They know that there's a chance they might get snapped by an alligator, but one of us got to do it. And so to have that vulnerability and that trust that these women gave me, I realized how powerful of a responsibility it is as a filmmaker. And yeah, I just want to become greater and greater in telling stories.
Well, all four of you are powerful filmmakers, and I want to congratulate you for these documentaries. They're all incredible. They're all just getting accolade after accolade. So I want to wish all of you the best of luck in the upcoming awards season. Once again, the titles, everyone needs to watch them. The Deepest Breath, Kokomo City, Little Richard, I Am Everything, and The Mission. Thank you all for joining our Gold Derby documentary panel today.
Thank you. It's been wonderful
Thank
listening to
you.
you all.
Congrats, guys.